please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
All-time highs for the Nifty Bank. 28,377 was touched.
Yet another day at record levels. We seem to be consolidating, at least for the benchmark indices.
The market's actually holding on, at least on the Nifty. 50-odd points on the Nifty is what we have.
Interesting buying, by the way, on a Sadhav Engineering, just as the market was closing out. Sadhav is up about 7.5%. Again, late buying on Jet Airways and quite a move at that, 6.5% up on Jet Airways. Even SpiceJet rallied a lot from the lows of the day. Not so much Interglobe, but SpiceJet, and the move on Jet was particularly pronounced.
New day, new record high. The Sensex and the Nifty hit fresh all-time highs once again, but the gains got capped by profit-taking. Midcaps saw minor losses. The Nifty Bank also touched fresh all-time highs, but saw profit-taking.
Well, stocks which were essentially stocks from the metal space did very well. I mean, actually, it was one of the top gaining sectors. JSW Steel and Vedanta rose. LME base metal prices were focal point, and of course, I mean, the rupee movement also led to some gains.
Rise in crude oil prices to $76 sparks inflation fears. Bank stocks see profit-taking. Nifty Bank index ends flat, while the PSU Bank index ends in the red.
Sources indicate fertilizer companies will now be given subsidies every week instead of waiting for months. Fertilizer stocks surge on the back of this development.
As the August 27th deadline for resolution of stressed assets ends, debt-ridden stocks continue to remain under pressure, although NTPC gains after Bank of America Merrill Lynch indicates that the company could be a beneficiary, as it could be appointed to manage stressed power projects. Well, those were the top 5 headlines from Dalal Street. Hello and welcome to Markets Today Talk Back. This is the show where we tell you about everything that happened during the 6 hours of trading in just 5 headlines. I'm Lata Venkatesh, with me, Prashant Nair. Hi, Prashant.
Lata, hi. The gains continue, 15 points more on the Nifty, and already over the last 2 trading sessions, the Nifty is up almost about 1.6, 1.7%. Well, we get to the nitty-gritties of trading action today in just a bit. 5 stories which basically capture what happened in the day. We answer your stock questions, and to answer those questions, Sanjeev Bhasin joins us today. We have Mitesh Thakkar on the charts, who's with us as well. Gentlemen, thanks very much, both of you, for being with us here on the show. Before we begin the Q&A session, as always, let's spend some time looking at what really happened as far as the day is concerned, the ebb and flow, and finally where we ended. Lata.
Well, it started on a positive note. We saw big gains, over a percentage point gains in Wall Street and Asia, somewhat in the green for the second day running, largely because there was a deal struck between US and Mexico. So from the chaos of trade wars, even if the multilateral NAFTA gets broken up, there were at least some bilateral peace on the trade front emerging, and the markets took it positively. That was most important. The market was in a frame of mind to take the US-Mexico bilateral agreement positively. Remember, this is coming on top of Jerome Powell's promise of gradual rate hikes. So that tailwind was also there for the bulls, and together you saw the bulls once again continuing to do what they do best, which was buying. For the Indian markets itself, the negative came in the form of crude. While we had these positives, which you could see in the Sensex and the Nifty touching highs, the Nifty Bank, after touching all-time highs or fresh highs, started seeing profit-taking, largely because, you know, the usual cycle, higher crude means higher inflation, and that coupled with slight pressure on the rupee would mean higher yields. The 10-year yield did go to 7.9, and that was reason enough to see some profit-taking in banking stocks. But overall, the bulls have still retained the advantage. What do you see by way of stock-specific action?
So metals, energy and IT, Lata, were 3 areas which essentially were the top gainers. So metals, energy and technology stocks. In terms of losers, PSU banks were weak, real estate stocks were weak, and you had the pharmaceutical stocks which actually ended the day lower. Large cap stocks, I mean, actually these 3 stocks, RIL, HDFC and Maruti, contributing to almost about 30-40% of the gains. I mean, actually throw in a Maruti there, Maruti and HDFC Bank in there as well, and that's almost 50% of the 50-odd point that you saw between these 4 stocks, including HDFC Bank. So again, very concentrated, something we saw yesterday as well. Large cap stocks which were lower, GAIL, Bank of Baroda and Yes Bank were top losers. GAIL actually came down heavily, 5%. That entire story of GAIL being demerged into 3 separate entities, I think that is now out of the window and market readjusting to that new reality. So broader losses, and since market breadth was negative in favor of declines, and starting with declines, HDFC Asset Management, AMC, 4%, Union Bank almost 5%, Canara Bank down about 4%, PFC was down, Goa Carbon, Hikal Limited, we had something like a DB Corp which was lower in trade as well. Only touching upon names with large volumes. There were gainers as well. The Adani stocks, I mean, Adani Transmission, Adani Enterprises, big gains. Last week we saw these MNC pharma companies do very well, and you saw some some of that play out today. Pfizer was up big time. Jet Airways was down, was up about 6.5. It had sold off quite a bit, almost back at 300 levels. Equitas, Chambal Fertilizer. I mean, I'm just highlighting one fertilizer name. There were many others which did well. Cafe Coffee Day and something like a Dixon Technologies, which continues its run from the last couple of days. Lata.
Okay, well, that was the stock-specific action. Now let's get to the broader picture and invite our guests. Mitesh, let me come to you first. What did you make? I mean, the bulls largely held on to their advantage as far as the Sensex and the Nifty were concerned. It's only the Nifty Bank that they let slip a bit. So you go with long positions on what early morning tomorrow?
Yeah, even Lata, I think the target of 11,750 was met, and I really don't have an immediate target, given the fact that we are quite stretched overbought and we don't have an extension target available now. But the key here could be the Bank Nifty. While the Nifty didn't have any scare, the Bank Nifty started with the first hour, kind of turning negative after a good opening, but it did not fall post that. So we are still closer to the upper end of the range, which is 28,360, 28,380. In case we start getting past 28,400, the Bank Nifty could gain some momentum. It's been underperforming, so it might catch up, and that could possibly lead the Nifty even higher. So I think the next trigger which I would look for in the markets to trade would be the Bank Nifty getting past 28,380, 400 zones, and then we can look at 28,750, 800 as the near-term target for the Bank Nifty itself.
Okay, fair point. Well, on that note, let's also listen to another technical expert, Atul Suri of Marathon Trends. This is, of course, a long-term technical trend. He believes that the bull market will carry on for a good two to three more years.
The last 1,000 points have really taken most people by surprise. We were coming out of a 6-month, very, very difficult market, and where a lot of the mid-cap, small-cap indexes were down 20–30%. I really think that one must have a belief in the longer-term trend that we are in this market. And one must not really wait for the perfect situation, perfect correction that at which stage I'll deploy. You must get into this market. Yes, it's run up a lot. Yes, it will correct. But the thing is that you have to look beyond these short-term cycles and ultimately be allocated to equities, because I still feel that we are part of a larger bull market, which I think will carry on for the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, Atul Suri, someone who stayed bullish now for a while, continues to believe, well, this is going to last for at least the next couple of years. The second headline, the second big story of the day, metal stocks topped the charts. The metal index was up almost 2%, led by Hindalco, JSW Steel and Vedanta, which were up between 2 and 4%. This rally in metals can be attributed in part to a rise in base metal prices, which we saw on the LME exchange, and of course a weakening rupee as well. Manisha Gupta is here with some analysis on this. Manisha, what's your sense?
Well, yes, strong gains marked the day for metals as a sector in the day today in all time zones, mind you, whether it was Shanghai, LME or the Indian markets. Aluminum actually continued to be an outperformer with more than 2% gains in all of these three exchanges. We have seen the prices run up as there has been some explosion in a smelter plant in China. In any case, China is looking to cut output as the winter months start to curb pollution. So this is one metal which actually has been a better performer of the lot in 2018. The other metals also saw strong gains. You had copper prices trading at 2-week highs. The steel ingredients like nickel and zinc also gained a couple of percentage points on the higher side. And we have seen the strength also come in on the back of strong economic data from Europe. The weakness in US dollar, that one has been trading at a 1-month lows, also supported the dollar-denominated commodities. And then there was LME buying as well. Remember, it was a long weekend for LME. The markets were shut there yesterday. So LME London buying also supported supported all of those metals during the day today. Going forward, it really is going to be about the China and US trade war concerns. That is the only weighing factor here. The markets also were rejoicing, by the way, the US and Mexico, the trade treaty, if you can call it that, that also led to some support in the metal space today.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Manisha. In fact, there was an interesting article in cnbc.com that while GDP and other data in China looks weak, steel prices or metal prices are strong, and that normally indicates a strong Chinese economy. So there is a dichotomy there.
By the way, Lada, here in India as well,
metal prices are rising.
There are steel price increases which are expected in September. The reason it is important because it is a seasonally weak quarter. But despite that, I think we're just a couple of days away from September. We will see price increases. That's the general expectation.
No, absolutely. In fact, we had, I think one of the steel companies say that demand is growing at 7 or 8% and supply is growing at 4 to 5%. So there is an inevitability of price increases coming in. Well, we have a viewer query, but this one is not on steel, it's on metals. Chaitanya from Delhi has messaged us with a question on Hindalco. He says he has 200 shares of the company. He has purchased it 135. Good for him. He has been holding on for 2.5 years and says he's a long-term investor, obviously 2.5 years. But should he hold or sell? Sanjeev, your thoughts?
Well, I would say just stay hold. You know, Hindalco's seen a lot of volatility after they announced they were going to acquire LRS, and that saw some uncertainty because of the little bit of a debt overhang. But the other acquisition which they did many years back, Novelis, has turned out to be a icing on the cake, and we think both the aluminium copper cycle are now turning towards the upside. We think commodities are going to do very, very well in 2019. 275 would be the medium-term target, but 325 if this bull market goes beyond expectations to 12.5, 13,000 by early March.
Okay. Third headline?
Okay, bank stocks saw some profit-taking in trade today. Nifty Bank Index ended flat, while the PSU Bank Index was over 1% in the red. This as oil prices rose to $76 a barrel on possible production increases, which sparked inflation fears. We've got some questions coming in. This is Mr. MP Saini, who's got 450 shares of Yes Bank. He hasn't mentioned the buying price, but wants to know what the future is. I mean, this is a bit of a tricky one. This is not just about Yes Bank and what banks may do, but very specifically what may happen with Yes Bank and the top management team. Lada, I mean,
well, I know everybody is waiting for the approval for Mr. Rana Kapoor's next term of 3 years. The current term ends on August 31st. And I think the 10% that the stock has lost from 400 to what is it, 370 today, largely because market just wants to have that uncertainty out. Rana Kapoor, of course, is a pillar for the bank. Now, one doesn't know what to make of this. I spoke to several other banks. I wrote to Yes Bank themselves, and they said, we are awaiting, we are expecting the permission by August 31st. Other managing directors told me that there have been instances when they have got permission on the penultimate day. There was one instance when he got permission to continue in the second term after 5 o'clock on that day. That is, he got it at 8 p.m. So, you know, technically his term had ended at the end of the working day at 6 o'clock, but he got permission at 8 p.m. So before the next trading day, he was appointed managing director or reappointed managing director. So, but the market, of course, has its own set of rumors. That is what we had about, we heard about Yes Bank. Sanjeev, any thoughts on Yes Bank at 370?
So, Lata, I think it has been an outperforming bank, a mix of both corporate and retail, and the numbers were very, very pleasing on the upside. Like you said, Mr. Rana Kapoor has actually been 3/4 of the pillar behind it, and he's been an exemplary leader from the front. I think the volatility is an opportunity to buy. The bank is fairly large, and I don't see one man making that much of a difference. It will just be sentimental, but if he continues, I think you'll be back to 400. So I think this should be an opportunity to buy rather than sell, because the underlying fundamentals for Yes Bank remain very, very firm.
Okay. Mitesh, what about you? If, like Gandhiji's famed monkeys, you were deaf, blind and dumb and not look at any of the fundamental news, what does the chart say?
Yeah, Lata, so I think the long-term chart is quite positive, but in the short term, what we are seeing is around 390, 400. I think the stock is facing some supply, which kind of coincides with the earlier highs. So maybe around this level it might consolidate, but once it starts getting past 400, I think 450, 460 should be the next logical target over here. And I would agree with Sanjeev. I think in case there is any volatility, I think that would be an opportunity to buy. Anything close to 350, 340 would be an excellent entry point if it comes.
Okay, we also spoke with the RBL Bank's management. Rajiv Ahuja, Executive Director of the bank, he expects to grow at a compounded annual rate of between 30 and 35%, all the way into FY20. I mean, the stock is from 500 levels moved up to 620, 630 kind of levels, so it's seen a good run. Listen in.
We've grown our book in the previous quarter at about 36% year on year. We've guided the market to expect 30 to 35% compounded over the last 4-year period till 2020. We are confident that we can maintain a NIM of 4% in spite of a higher cost of funds, which we have witnessed over the last 6-8 months.
Well, Bharat Forge expects to clock revenues of 1,000 crore rupees from its defense business in the next 2 years. That's the word we got from Chairman and Managing Director of the company, Baba Kalyani. He also told CNBCTV18 that they were creating capacity to build the largest artillery unit in the world at the rate of 1 gun a day. Listen.
We are right now working on creating a capacity, hopefully by end of next year, to build 1 gun a day. So that's our capacity, and that will be perhaps the largest artillery capacity in the world once we get to that. And clearly, exports is pretty much on the cards. In 2 years, we'll reach 1,000 crores, so that's pretty much where we are. I think if we are a little lucky with exports, we might do a little better.
Okay, we take a very quick break here. The first on the show. We come back. Stay tuned. More questions and answers coming right up. Welcome back. You're still with us here on Markets Today Talk Back. Sanjeev Bhasin and Mitesh Thakkar have been taking questions, and we've been running you through some of the top stories of the day. So here's the fourth one. Fertilizer stocks surged today on subsidy cheer. The likes of fertilizer and chemicals, FACT, which basically is fertilizer and Chemical Travancore, Southern Petrochemicals, Petrochemical Industries, Chambal Fertilizer, Coromandel, and a host of others ended the day in the green after sources told Network 18 that companies will now be given subsidies every week instead of waiting for these subsidies for months. Sonal Bhutra is standing by with more details on how this can help the working capital cycle for fertilizer companies. Sonal, over to you.
Well, yes, that's right. Fertilizer stocks were buzzing in trade today, and that happened after sources told our sister channel CNBC Awaaz that fertilizer companies will be paid subsidies every week. This is in comparison to earlier payment of around months. So earlier it used to take around 8 to 12 months for subsidies to reach the bank accounts of different companies, but now there is a mechanism which will be set up so that the companies are paid these subsidies every week instead of months, and payment gateway mechanism for the same is supposed to begin sometime next month. So that is quite positive for these companies, and that is why they were buzzing in trade today, because non-payment or late payment of these subsidies were leading to a huge amount of pressure on their working capital cycles, leading to bloated balance sheets and also creating negative working capital for these companies. So if this comes in, that will be a breather for these companies. I have been speaking to a lot of experts and also companies who told us that earlier, because of this DBT mechanism, that is direct benefit scheme, it was not reaching on time in accounts of various fertilizing companies, and that was creating a lot of pressure on their working capital cycle, leading to higher working capital debt and leading to lower return ratios. And all that, if this happens, will be taken care of, and maybe market liked it, and definitely it's a positive, and that's why these stocks are buzzing in trade today. Back to you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. With that, let's get to the first caller on the show. Mohammed is calling us from Andhra Pradesh with a question on Zuari Agro, I believe. Mohammed ji, go ahead.
Yes, hi Lata. I have 200 stocks of Zuari Agrochemicals bought at rupees 650. Okay. This was last year when I had bought it at the peak. And now the stock is clocking price at 320 odd rupees. I'm a long-term investor. I would like to know, would it ever reach my cost price?
Okay. Well, that's a tough one. Well, Sanjeev, that's straight away to you.
Yeah, so I think last year there was a huge impetus on mid-caps and, some of the thematic plays which took these stocks to very, very high values. And definitely this year we've seen a lot of pessimism. But, Zuari is one of the better plays. It's a well-run management. And I think that definitely, over the next 1 year, if this DBT transfer fructifies positively, then earnings will start to catch up, and we've seen that rainfall has been very good. We think the productivity and the numbers in the next 2 quarters will be very, very good. So I would actually suggest that if you get it on dips, try and average out if you want to stay in this stock, or alternatively, if you do get a rally and closer to your price, try and exit and then look for something else. But I think if you are going to be patient for another year, you may definitely get back to your price.
Okay, and the last line, thank you, Sanjeev, for that. Last line of the day, stressed assets continue to remain under pressure as the deadline for their resolution ended yesterday. This after the Allahabad High Court also declined to give private power companies any relief from the Reserve Bank circular, and that Reserve Bank circular exactly is this, that stressed assets over 2,000 crores will get up to August 27 to be resolved. If they weren't, they go to the NCLT. NTPC was the one actually which gained on account of this because of a Bank of America Merrill Lynch report which said that this company could be a beneficiary if it is appointed to manage other stressed power projects. But we don't quite know whether that is the way things will go, whether banks will buy up or keep the stressed power plants and have it run by NTPC. We don't know, but that was Bank of America's reasoning. We could have taken more questions, but completely out of time. Sanjeev and Mitesh, thank you very much for joining us. We wrap up on this edition of Markets Today. Talk back. Thanks for watching.